Welcome to Reuters Events Pharma Insights, the podcast all about pharma. I'm Jonathan Elliott, your host for this episode. Now, I was at the Reuters Events Pharma USA conference in Philadelphia recently, and one of the conversations that I have been thinking about ever since I was there was with Dr. Paul Burton, Chief Medical Officer at Amgen. I caught up with Paul after his keynote session, and I wanted to hear more from him about some of the big themes he'd been laying out on the stage. Paul has a genuinely sweeping remit at one of the world's biggest biotech companies. So when he talks about the future of pharma, it's worth listening. We got into Amgen's direct-to-consumer model and why Paul believes that going direct to patients is really the future of patient access full stop. We talked about prescription abandonment, health literacy, and what it actually takes to keep patients on the medicines they need. We also explored what Paul calls a hinge moment in drug discovery, how AI and massive computing power are transforming the way we understand disease at a biological level. So thank you very much for joining us today, Paul. It's been really interesting to dig into some of your themes that you've been talking about in a keynote. Let's just kick off with the first question, which is the DTC, the direct-to-consumer mandate. Your keynote panel argues that DTC is the future of patient access, not just a niche experiment. For a company of Amgen's scale, what was the internal tipping point that made you commit to these direct-to-patient models?
Well, listen, thanks for having me. It's great to be here today. I don't think I agree, first of all, with the premise of the panel that it is it's really ready for prime time. I don't know that there was ever a single tipping point. I think there were probably 3 or maybe 4 data points that really led us to this. And I would say one is data. There is data from the Milken Institute that says that only 1 in 10 people in this country today has health literacy sufficient to navigate the healthcare system that we're in. You know, people going to the Mayo Clinic for a second opinion, 89% of people get a different or new diagnosis. So people find it hard to get into the system, and once they're in, it often fails them. So I think there was that piece of data. I think payers and systems are struggling, honestly, in many ways as patients are. And then I think there is just a opportunity to bring platforms like Amgen now. This is something where we now offer medicines like Repatha direct to consumers, $238 a month for this medicine. And then I would say finally the advent of AI, which is really taking over, I think, in healthcare so much. So I think it's that kind of combination of different data points that really led us to this place.
Fantastic. Okay, the session highlights reducing prescription abandonment as a core goal. In your experience, how does the DTC model fix that?
Well, abandonment, I think, is complex, but it's very commonplace. Compliance, adherence, and perseverance to medicine really is an area for us as an industry that we've invested a lot of time in. I think patients will stay on medicines if they understand the benefit, why they're on it, if they understand their disease, if they understand what the medicine is doing for them. Certainly, if they can afford it, and that programs like Amgen now really try and support that. But I think at the end of the day, it's really education that ensures that patients stay on medicines. Now, we should not forget that 28 million people in this country are basically uninsured. And even for under 65s, about 40% of patients have very high deductible healthcare plans. And so I think those as well are so important here. So abandonment is a complex problem that is multifactorial. So it's hard to pick out a single thing, but I think if you can understand some of the root causes, you can at least begin to try and solve for them.
Okay, interesting. Data and unmet needs. How are direct patient touchpoints helping Amgen identify unmet needs that may be missed via traditional channels, such as claims data or physician visits?
Yeah. So claims data, physician visits, very, very important. But I don't think you get a sense of really what is on a patient's mind, what's driving them, how they think about their disease. So we work extensively with advocacy groups. We do now more and more patient panel interactions. We'll talk to them about a disease, talk to them about medicines, see what they want to trade off in terms of efficacy, safety, how they think about, to your earlier point, staying on a medicine and not abandoning it. So I think, getting data out is one thing. How you translate data into knowledge and use those insights to help patients get to a better outcome is really what we're about, I would say, at Amgen today.
Okay, brilliant. Let's just talk about something that you've described the industry as being at a dawn of a hinge moment in drug development. What specifically is different about discovery today that makes this period feel more significant than previous waves of innovation?
I really do think we're at this almost like once in a generation moment in drug discovery and then how we do clinical trials and bring those medicines to patients. I think around discovery, massive, massive amounts of data, epigenetics, how genes are influenced and turned on and turned off, systems biology, such hugely complex problems that previously we couldn't really have understood them. And to do systems biology was very difficult. I would say now that AI, this hinge moment we're in, we have such massive computing power that you really can interrogate biological pathways, potentially identify new targets to go after, and even then optimize actually how you'll do your clinical development program and even commercialize. So I think this compute power coupled with the agentic nature of AI is what really is revolutionizing discovery for us.
Yeah, absolutely. You've long argued that medical affairs should be a competitive differentiator rather than just a scientific conscience. What does a medical affairs team look like when it's actually driving competitive impact on the ground?
I think the medical affairs organization, I have responsibility for safety, regulatory affairs, digital medicine, public health, and then medical affairs. Medical affairs is an interesting organization. I think, it is ultimately the ultimate, let's say, custodian of the patient voice. So I think it brings in insights from the field, from patients directly, from physicians, and then tries to translate those insights into actionable data points that we can either design programs and help educate. So it's important for both systems and for patients. We integrate data into knowledge. And I think, how it really looks when it's working well in the field is that there is really a seamless integration between the field and the home office so that, data comes in, an insight comes in that can then be acted upon. It's all about driving access, but educating physicians, educating systems to know where and how best to deploy that agent in the patient care. That's what a really high-functioning medical affairs organization can do.
Fantastic. Okay, how do you build a cohesive medical strategy across such diverse therapeutic technology?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, it is diverse and it's broad. I think, I always fall back on three things, which are data generation, data integration, and then data translation or dissemination. So generation, integration, dissemination. And I think if you can do that, how do you cost efficiently, in a very speedy manner, generate data that addresses key questions out there that physicians and patients have today? How can you get answers to people quickly? Nobody wants to take 3, 4, 5 years anymore to get answers to those key marketplace questions. So how can you generate data cost effectively and quickly? How do you then integrate it into tools? So meet physicians, meet systems, meet patients where they are today. The way that bite-sized pieces of information and knowledge that people want today is very different to how it was 10 years ago. Think about what we're doing right now in a podcast. That didn't exist 10 years ago. That's how people want to get information. And then how do you disseminate it? Do you go through congresses? Do you go through publications? Do you go through social media and other kind of digital channels? I think it's the latter. That's how people want to get bite-sized pieces of information today. So if you can get that right and then have metrics that don't only talk and think about volume, but really impact, that's what we try and do at Amgen across all of those very diverse diseases and medicines.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today, Dr. Paul Burton. That was very, very interesting.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Paul Burton there, Chief Medical Officer at Amgen, talking to me at the Reuters Events Pharma USA conference in Philadelphia. A remarkable perspective on where pharma is heading, from the doctor's surgery all the way to the frontiers of AI-driven drug discovery. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it and join us next time on Pharma Insights, where I'll be talking to Tom Lampron, Vice President of Oncology Global Marketing at Merck, about the art and science of pharmaceutical launches, what it really takes to drive behaviour change across thousands of healthcare providers, why early momentum is everything, and the role of AI in making it all happen faster. Until then, goodbye.